And I'm hitting start webinar.
Okay, fantastic. We'll give it a few minutes to let everybody start filing in. Oh, you have 34 participants. Yeah, so we're starting to see everybody start entering now, which is great. We'll give it another minute or so. Okay, guys, it's 2 o'clock. It just turned 2. So we'll wait a few more minutes and then we'll. A few more trickling in. We'll give it another minute or so. Yeah, just a few more minutes, but it's fantastic to have everybody joining. Wow. So wonderful to see everybody logging on. Okay, I think I'll give it one more minute and I think we are about to start. Just give me one, let me just double check. A few more are trickling in, so hang in there. It's only 2:01. Still filing in. Okay, so I think, you know what, I think we will start, and as people start to trickle in, they'll just join us a little bit in mid-sentence. So good afternoon, everyone. My name is Paula Oruskovich. I'm the Communications Director for California Wines Canada. On behalf of all of us here, Danielle Giroux, our Trade Director, Celeste Finn, our Marketing Coordinator, and myself, we'd love to welcome everyone here today to our first ever Canadian version of Sommelier Sessions, featuring the amazing wines and winemakers from Jackson Family Winery. Over the next 45 minutes, we will be exploring Chardonnay and Pinot Noir from 2 of California's most eminent cool climate growing regions, Santa Barbara and Sonoma. Joining us will be those fabulous winemakers, Jill Russell of Cambria Estate Winery and Ryan Zepaltas of Copan Wines, who will teach us about the diverse terroir and climates which define these amazing regions. They'll discuss how the influences of wind and fog shape the growing season and the resulting fruit and wines. So welcome, Jill and Ryan. We're delighted to have you here with us. Our hosts of today's program, great to have you. Our hosts of today's program are Mika Giroux and Sam Melanson. Mika Giroux is from Halpern Wines. She's grown up around food and wine. So working in the wine industry for Mika was a natural progression for her. She spent the last 10 years working in restaurants, most recently as a sommelier at the Scotiabank Arena Platinum Club, and various roles on the wine agency side at Halpern. Currently, Mika is focused on key account management, private and licensee, as well as online events. So delighted to have you here, Mika. And you'll be joined by the handsome and charming Sam Melanson, who's a Toronto-based sommelier and wine educator. Sam, you've been involved with the local wine community and have spent the previous five years working at Toronto's premier wine school, the Somm Factory, as lead instructor. Sam is an Italian wine ambassador and is accredited as an advanced sommelier through the Court of Master Sommeliers and currently preparing to write the Master Sommelier program in 2021. So happy to have you here, Sam, as well.
Hey,
So before we get started, just a few housekeeping items. So as attendees, you'll all be muted for the duration of the webinar. However, you will see on your screen at the very bottom that there are 2 channels for you to communicate with other attendees and pose questions to the panelists. The first is the chat session. You'll see that on the lower bottom of your screen. The chat session is an informal way for you to communicate with other guests. So just be sure to select everyone, all panelists and attendees in the to field, as it can default to panelists only. Secondly, the Q&A section, this is where we ask you to please submit any questions you may have for the panel to be answered during the webinar. If you find yourself with streaming issues, you may want to encourage other members of your office or household to log off the internet and avoid simultaneous streaming to save bandwidth. You may also want to log out and try again with another internet service such as Firefox or Chrome if you're having issues. This webinar is being recorded and all of you will receive a link to the video recording in the following days. So that's it. Let's get started and escape to California wine country for the next 45 minutes. Take it away, Mika and Sam.
Thank you, Paula. This is great. So nice to be together on Zoom. It's very rainy and dark in Toronto, so we can dream about California weather. And Jill and Ryan, it's nice to meet you face to face. I think, I speak for Sam and I when being in the wine industry, the highlight of our careers is meeting winemakers and exploring regions. So we may not be able to do it now, but at least we can travel through Zoom. So thanks so much.
Yeah, it's a real pleasure to be with you guys, and I know it's a pretty short webinar, so we're going to get Jill and Ryan chatting pretty quickly here. But just as a little segue, Jill, into where you guys are located, I find it so interesting that we're going to look at 2 wineries here, one in the North Coast, one in the Central Coast, for Canadians nearly 600 kilometers away from each other, and yet we're 2 wineries that are focusing on similar grape varieties, Chardonnay, Pinot Noir mostly. Actually, both have a little bit of Syrah, which is fun. But to me, that's kind of amazing because there's such a dramatic coastal influence in both of your growing regions coming from the California current and the Pacific. So maybe you could start in and talk a little bit about where you're located and what makes your kind of sites unique and special in Santa Barbara County.
Yeah, of course. And thank you for having us. It is great to connect virtually. It is hard to travel. So we hope to take you on a journey to California while we're together today. And so I'm at Cambria Estate Winery here in northern Santa Barbara County in Santa Maria Valley. And we're part of Jackson Family Wines. And we were the 2nd winery created after Kendall Jackson. And our vineyard names are named after Barbara Banke, our proprietor's daughters. So we'll get into that more when we talk about the wines, but our Pinot Noir is named after Julia, and our Catherine's Vineyard is named after Katie. So we'll get into the vineyards soon when we talk about the wines, but we can go ahead and bring up the map of Santa Barbara. I know we have some slides to show you just to kind of, we wanted to bring the site to you. So this is our estate in Santa Maria Valley. We are a winery that's surrounded by its vineyards. So when I keep saying estate, they are our vineyards, and this is our only vineyard source. So previously, I've worked as an assistant winemaker at lots of small wineries. Most recently was Paul Lotto, and he was a sommelier in Canada. So but sourcing from all over Santa Barbara, and then coming here, this is my 4th vintage at Cambria as head winemaker, and it's a dream to get to know this vineyard site. We love this map because you do see the Pacific Ocean up where it says Cambria, and then all the different blocks, I kind of see them as their own vineyard. So when we get into the wines, how those all bring something to the blend. And then our neighbor vineyards, Nielsen is part of our Jackson family wines to the east of us. And then west is Bien Nacido, which is a very famous vineyard that a lot of people are sourcing from. I've been working with Bien Nacido fruit ever since I got into the business. So I was always attracted to Santa Maria Valley. And now I get to make wine at Catherine and Julia's. So the next slide, I am Santa Maria Valley, and that's where I make my wine, but I can't go without talking about the region as a whole, specifically these 3 valleys that Jackson Family Wines have a lot of grape holdings there. So you see Santa Maria Valley at the top, and it is one of the oldest AVAs, so second after Napa. And then Los Alamos, which is not an AVA yet, but it's an awesome spot for Chardonnay and Pinot Noir that we, I think in the future it will become an AVA. And then you have the Santa Rita Hills that everyone knows and loves. And those 3 valleys, they're all, there's no obstruction to the ocean. So, you know, driving along the 101, actually our mountain range shift to be transverse, so east to west, and we have that full fog, coastal wind. We have the fog driving in the morning, which sometimes can be dangerous, and then we do get the sunshine, California sunshine, but then that cool breeze comes in and really cools things down. So really long hang time. We actually didn't finish picking Chardonnay up until last week. So those old vines that we have can really hang on there. And our ocean isn't lay at the beach, pretty ocean. It is very stark and cold. So any friends visit, you need to bring your layers to our beach. It's not sunshine layout. It's definitely cold, and that impacts our grapes. So yeah, I just wanted to touch on Santa Barbara.
Thank you. I should point out, I know everyone's paying close attention, but at the end of this program, we will have some giveaways. So if you got to take notes, take some notes, and we'll hand it over to you, Ryan, to take us to where you are.
Yeah, so I'm Ryan Zepaltas, winemaker here at Copan Wines. I've been here since late 2017. And yeah, I kind of got my start. I moved out to California in 1998. And my first wine job was at a winery called La Crema, which y'all may have heard of. Worked there for a couple of years as a cellar rat, and started to travel the world working harvests in New Zealand, and came back to the States in early 2000. And my resume landed on the desk of Adam Lee at Siduri Wines, which is another now part of Jackson family. But I worked for Siduri for many years before they were acquired by Jackson family. And that's kind of where I came up. Worked there 18 vintages. During that time, I also had a consulting business where I was making wines for a lot of small clients. And at that time, I also ran my own company called Zepaltas Wines. So I did 13 vintages of Zepaltas wines. And then, you know, fast forward 2017, the opportunity for Copan came up, and I was super excited to come work for Copan. Always loved the sensibility and the, you know, the take on California that Copan was into. So me joining with Copan was like a fish to water. Really loved the style that we're going for. And so yeah, super happy. Just finished up my 3rd vintage and super excited to put it all to bed. Copan Wines, you know, our sensibilities are, you know, a little bit of an old world influence, but really embracing the best of the cooler parts of California, mainly on the North Coast. Our 2 main areas of focus are the Sonoma Coast and the Anderson Valley, which are two regions that are, you know, very much rely on the coastal effect. So fog, wind, proximity to the ocean, that temperature shift from day to night is all very important, especially when growing Pinot Noir and Chardonnay. So the wines we're tasting today are both from the Sonoma Coast, all from estate vineyards. If you want to pull up the map of the Sonoma Coast AVA, I'll kind of walk you through. Thank you, Celeste. So I'm going to go from south to north. The Sonoma Coast the appellation is a little bit silly. It's obnoxiously large. There's parts of the Sonoma Coast that are like east of Chalk Hill, east of Highway 101, which in my mind is a little silly that those are considered coasts. So the vineyards that I like to focus on are truly near water. We look down in the Petaluma Gap. We have our estate holdings, the Cloud Landing Vineyard, Corners Hills West. Those have a lot of wind and fog effect from San Francisco, San Pablo Bay, and also the Petaluma Gap, which is like a little wind tunnel that kind of goes from the Pacific Ocean through the town of Petaluma into where those two vineyards are. So a little bit milder in the spring, but definitely has that air conditioning comes on in the 2:30, 3 o'clock in the afternoon. So usually about 10 to 15 degrees cooler than, say, Santa Rosa, which is like the main town in Sonoma County. As we move a little bit north, we have our Seascape and Cote vineyards. In my mind, great vineyards for Pinot Noir growing. Also great for Chardonnay, but I especially love the Pinot Noir. Those vineyards are very unique. Near Green Valley, the Sebastopol Hills, a little bit more mild there, a little bit more consistent for yields and whatnot. So that's where we can kind of rely on consistency of yield and a little bit more typical riper Pinot flavors, but still very much cool climate influence. Again, very close to the coast. And then we move north to my favorite area of Sonoma Coast, what we consider the true Sonoma Coast, Fort Ross, Seaview area. Near that region, we have the Sea Lift Vineyard and the Tidal Break Vineyard. And to me, those are, in my mind, if we had Grand Crus, those would be the Grand Cru vineyards. Those are where I love to create the focus of my blends from the Sea Lift Vineyard for Pinot Noir and the Tidal Break Vineyard for Chardonnay. Those vineyards, just a couple of ridge tops in from the Pacific Ocean, heavy coastal influence, but they're higher elevation. So they tend to have their head above the fog in the middle part of the day, a lot of times in the month of July. But the best part about that region is we're so close to the ocean that the winds come in every afternoon, cool the place down. So warm days, but very short periods of warmth during the day, and then very cool late afternoons all through the evening into the next mid-morning. So what that breeds for us is long extended growing season, slow incremental ripening. So we get slow sugar accumulation, but great development of flavors without obnoxiously high heat that we would lose our acidity on them. So that's why I love that area for these two wines we're tasting today.
Great.
With Copan, we're definitely going for a lighter style, tend to pick on the earlier side of things, just like brightness, acidity, energy in our wines. So hopefully we'll demonstrate that today.
Yeah, just before we get into to tasting these great wines in front of us, Ryan and Jill, do you want to just take a second to chat about your kind of winemaking philosophy? I know Ryan started to get into it with kind of earlier pick dates and cooler site selection, but what about once you get the fruit into the winery? How do you guys approach, how you handle the grapes and make wine?
Since we'll trade off. So being that I worked for a lot of different small producers, getting to know different vineyard sites, getting to know their philosophies, it was great to work for some winemakers that were in pursuit of balance, some winemakers that were way on the other side. I feel like I'm very much in the middle. And what's great about our estate, I have all these different blocks to work with, and I'm getting to know the estate. So this was my 4th vintage here, and taking that one block, doing an earlier pick, doing a later pick. The vineyard manager probably should tell me no sometimes, but he really is excited about for me to get to know the vineyard. And so each year I'm kind of fine tuning that. And then also with the vineyard site, I think it's a beautiful site for doing stainless steel fermentation for our Chardonnay. So getting to know that in each block, all our different clones and all our different, we have some old vines planted in the 70s. So doing some stainless steel compared to the barrel fermentation. Every year has been different. Our Catherine's blend has a different percentage of stainless, so I'm not going for like, this is my percent. It's kind of what the vintage is bringing each year. I might like the stainless more, I might like barrel fermentation. I do love barrel fermentation, and I'm not afraid of new oak. So with our site being up on the Santa Maria bench and our soils, we have this bright acidity, so it can handle a little bit of the touch of oak, and but just making sure that's all in balance. So bringing things into the winery, keeping everything separate. Harvest is definitely the beginning of winemaking style. The pick date is very important. So I love being able to go to the vineyard multiple times a day. But then blending is also my favorite part. So bringing in all these things that we have created and then making that special blend.
Cool. What about you, Ryan?
For me at Copan, our goal is to, make the wines that reflect the place they're grown. We want the wine in the glass to be, basically peering into the vineyard. And so for us to achieve that, that means we want to have little to obscure anything in the process. So, in our philosophy, we like to pick a little bit early. We're not picking super early, where the wines don't have any flavor development. Like Jill said, it's somewhere in the middle, where, it's important to bring those wines in when they are physiologically ripe. When they arrive at the winery, we try not to get in the way. We avoid using cultured yeasts on our wines. We don't use a lot of new oak. We don't inoculate for malolactic. Everything kind of happens on its own. And for us, that's just, ultimately, I don't call my wines natural wines, but they are, in a sense, that way. At the end of the day, I want my grapes to be just fermented grape juice. So if I can get healthy fruit into the winery, get it through fermentation, get it into barrel for aging, and just not have, ingredients or not have a lot of inputs or outputs. If we don't have to filter a wine, we won't. And for me, that's what we're just trying to do, just to make them as a straight line from the vineyard as possible. So.
Awesome. Thank you. Well, let's dive into the tasting. So we're going to start with the 2 Chardonnays, I believe. So if we could get that slide up. Perfect. And is everyone okay if we start with the Cambria?
Sure.
I'm good with it. Yeah, I actually haven't had a sip of it. I had the Copan before. So yeah, I wanted to, I brought up the old vines a little bit, talking about our vineyard and, different picking of those old vines. So this blend is actually 90% coming from vines that were planted in the 70s, early 70s. So for me, it was like a dream come true to walk into this estate and walk these vines. And I'm still like, this is a fruit I get to work with. Usually winemakers are seeking this out. They bring such great flavors to the blend. I still want to get to know some of the younger vines. I'll be here, I say, the rest of my career. So getting to know those different blocks and bringing something to the blend. So we have the different, a couple different clones in there, and bringing something else to the blend. But also when I have access to these old vines, that's going to be most of this blend that you have here. And this tasting note is great because it actually shows Katie Jackson. She is a real person. And I realize we all say the girls. So everyone has been here a very long time. Our average tenure for the crew is 19 years. So 2 just celebrated their 30 years. So I'm definitely the newbie around here. But they have stories of the girls when they were young and when they would come and stay at the ranch. And then Katie Jackson is our, she's in charge of our sustainability for all of Jackson Family Wines. So not only, is wine a big focus around here, but having a leader that's so devoted to our planet is great to have and look up to. And we all take that to heart, and pretty much the land that we have, we want it for the future. And what we do with the farming and what we do at the winery is all sustainable. And the 2 daughters are really a big part of that. So that's great for the team here to have that involvement. with them, but getting into the wine, I might go ahead and take a sip too. So you definitely, I have this, we get really exuberant tropical fruit in Santa Maria Valley, but different areas of the site, vineyard site, have, you know, more citrus or more guava, and having that little bit of new French oak. So it's all, the stats are right up there, about 20%. And again, that will change from year to year how the blend works itself out. But it's not over the top, and really balances well with the acidity and the tropical fruit. So I hope you can, you know, taste the citrus blossoms, grapefruit, something in Santa Maria Valley, Santa Barbara, we get a savory note, which is, we, even in our Chardonnays, I taste it more in the Pinots, and we'll talk about that when we get to the Pinot, but you know, this minerality is there, the savory, salty, definitely goes back to what we keep talking about as being close to the ocean and our soils and that fog and wind that we have. So like Ryan mentioned, this long hang time that we have, I am never rushed to pick. Even we had a couple heat waves, but we were still able to, these old vines are kind of this like California sprawl, really big canopies. They're like shaded. The row direction is actually to the ocean. So this wind is, you know, funneling through those rows, and they weren't affected by the heat wave. And we could still go ahead and pick them later when they have more flavor development. And actually, sometimes I really am waiting for the acids to drop out a little bit because they are so high. So some years I've picked into November, but we were done last week, and everyone is very happy with that harvest is done, and I'm not waiting till November. So
yeah. It's really neat to taste because you get that tropicality, you get the ripeness of fruit, but there's still a kind of line of acidity that runs through. And I think it's really interesting. Clearly, both of you talk quite a bit about harvest date and hang time and where that kind of balance falls for you. And it's interesting to hear that, you know, you're looking at multiple things. It's not just, okay, we're at 23.5 bricks, let's pull the fruit in. I mean, you're looking for phenolic physiological ripeness. You're looking for, in your case, Jill, sometimes for the acids to drop more. And I think that's a really great approach when it comes to these wines, because you're not just picking on one thing, but you're looking to find that kind of balance, right?
yeah, I mean, we have a wonderful lab, but it is going out there, tasting the grapes, looking at the seeds, looking at what the vine's telling you too.
I think one thing that's cool about this wine, if I could talk about Cambria for 2 seconds, is the people out there should not discount the fact that, you know, this blend is made from really old vines. And for me as a winemaker, that's super exciting, because to have more established vines, like in my mind, the wines that are produced from more established vines are, you know, tend to be much more complex, much more layered. You know, young vines tend to have great fruit and great energy, but you know, that complexity, what comes with vine age, is truly special. So for this wine to be a widely available wine that's made from old vines is pretty damn cool. And it's a testament to what Jackson family puts vineyards first before anything. So,
Yeah, it's a great
I'm
point.
kind of jealous. My blend's all from younger vines for the most part.
Well, should we dive into the Copain then?
Sure. So yeah, so what I love about Sonoma Coast Chardonnay is it's got good snap, good energy, but like I mentioned, these vineyards, you know, they get good sunshine and they get good development. So for me, for me, it's the Sonoma Coast is like the perfect place to kind of have that 50-50 split of good backbone, good nerve, good energy, but also good flavor. And, you know, the important part is your picking decision. You know, if I were to pick, you know, much earlier, I would have a wine that might have a lot of acid, but it wouldn't have a lot of flavor. So it's really nailing that picking decision to kind of get the best of both worlds. Chardonnays, for the most part, are whole cluster pressed. We, handpick the grapes, brought into the winery, and we pretty much load them straight into the press. Take that juice. Don't add SO2 at the press or anything. We take the Chardonnay juice, settle it in tank for about 24 hours, and then we rack them down to barrel, and we'll let them do their thing. So thankfully, our house yeast is pretty strong, and the barrel fermentations go pretty steadily. And then malolactic fermentation kicks off on its own as well. And everything's usually wrapped up by February, maybe early March, if there's some stragglers. But just like, it's pretty much just fermented grape juice, not much to it. There are some experimentations that end up in this blend where we do a little bit of skin contact. We might crush and destem some of this fruit and leave it soak on its skins for 2 hours, 4 hours, sometimes overnight before we press it. And what that does is adds kind of a little more backbone, a little bit more chalkiness to the wines. But that's a real small percentage of this blend. But we're always trying to push the envelope. We kind of have our recipe, so to speak, down, but we're always trying to crack the code to make better Chardonnay. Not much new oak on this. I think we go down to maybe 5% new oak, and then barrel select out. But yeah, again, just trying to have that, look into the vineyard with the wines. Also, what I forgot to mention in the beginning is 2018, we're beginning to convert over to organics in all of our vineyards. So we're started with organic spray program and organic herbicide program in the vineyards, just really trying to elevate our farming too. So that's definitely the last piece of the puzzle to kind of complete the Copan story from top to bottom. So not claiming this wine to be organic yet. We're not quite there yet, but everything in our estate is certified sustainable at minimum. So.
Great.
Super delicious, super fresh, and really textural, but in a really nice kind of positive way. That little bit of slight maceration, or that little bit of lees contact that is getting that extra little, as you said, Ryan, backbone to the wine. I really like that. For me, that really helps kind of push it towards being a great food wine. Have a little bit more kind of texture and to kind of cut through dishes. So that is something I really like in the wine.
Yeah, I mean, that's our goal with Copan is, we expect the wines to be on a dinner table with food. I kind of joke that, my desert island wine is like Chablis, and this is kind of our village level Chablis, so to speak. This is, crisp, fresh, just good energy, and just very versatile at the dinner table. Yeah.
Cool. If anyone in the chat has any questions, I see there's a couple that are popping up. Please feel free to kind of reach out. Do you guys want to answer a quick question now, or should we wait till the end?
Sure. Why don't we tackle the barrel one right now?
Yeah. So from Jenna, can you speak to your choice of barrel for Chardonnay? What effect does both the size of barrel and the percentage of new oak for this variety?
Yeah, so Jackson Family Wines, we're lucky to have a partnership with a stave mill in France and a cooperage. So barrels, we have endless barrels. I have rows behind me and other cellars full of barrels. So over the years, right now, our general manager, Denise, was the winemaker before me for 20 years, and spending time with the different blocks, really matching with the different profiles. So the different toast, we could have any toast level we want. We can make it up. We have ones that we've always used in the past. That's something, like Ryan said, with experimenting. I don't always love saying experimenting because it's not really, we're not going to mess anything up, but every year trying new barrels and and tracking those throughout a wine's life. Our company does it as a whole, and then we do it winery by winery as well. So matching the oak to the different clones or the vine age really helps. So we're not going to just put every wine into the same toast. And like sometimes everyone's like, what are you doing? I'm like, I'm just spending time on my barrel plan. And it's going to change over time because your vineyard changes, and barrels are very, it's a lot to learn over the years. I made sure I would go to barrel cooperages. They're really fascinating. And, you know, it takes a lot of tasting to make sure you're matching the right toast levels. But here in Santa Maria Valley, we might have different barrel preferences than our Sonoma partners because our fruit's different. And we definitely like things that aren't overly toasted and will marry with the wine in a great way. And again, just kind of dialing that in each year. And it's experimenting, but also we have years and years of research that has been, you know, written down for us too, which is great.
Yeah, same for me. You know, we're so lucky to have this, you know, winemakers workshop, so to speak, with our cooperage to design our own toasts, to be able to choose our own forests, our aging regime. So every year we're trying to tweak. You know, I would like to, within a few years, crack the code and decide what is the best barrel for Copan, Pinot, and Chardonnay. I'm not quite there yet, but I've got a lot of experiments going and trying to make the perfect barrel. So, you know, my philosophy is I like a toast level that's long with a low toast. We don't want big vanilla. You know, you toast heavily smoke the wine barrel. It can be really obnoxious, almost too much vanilla. And I guess the trick is to finding that perfect recipe where you're toasting it where you obviously you want to get something out of that oak, but you don't want it to be obnoxious. And so I'm still trying to figure out what works for us. But yeah, we are very lucky to kind of have our own cooperage for us. I age everything in 59-gallon barrels for the most part. Our single vineyard Chardonnays are aged in 600-liter casks. But even then, we still put some stuff in small barrels, and we're constantly trying to figure out what's the best. You know, I've been doing this 23 years, and I still don't know what I'm doing someday.
So maybe before we hop into Pinot Noir, we want to be mindful of everyone's time. Maybe if you both have a favorite dish that Chardonnays, and then we'll hop on over to Pinot. Jill, if you have something.
Yeah, I think I was just asked this on another virtual tasting last night. But I think seafood right away. So like a scallop ceviche and or like a crab cake. So anything seafood. But I have been known to, like, we do a lot of Santa Maria style barbecue around here, and I love Chardonnay. So I will drink my Chardonnay with, or any Chardonnay with steak as well. But I go seafood.
Yeah, absolutely. And how about you, Ryan?
Yeah, for me, especially coming into the cold fall and winter months, my canned answer is always the go-to is Thomas Keller's roasted chicken recipe, where it's very simple. You just trust the chicken, bundle it up real tight, pat it dry, put tons and tons of salt on the outside, throw it in the oven, I think almost 500 degrees for an hour. And it turns out perfect every time. The outside is very crispy and the inside is super juicy. Make a little sauce with some like dried herbs from the garden, and it's like the most savory, cozy dish. And I love Chardonnay with roasted chicken.
Peace. I probably should have had lunch before we did this because it's starting to get to me. Let's move on to the reds. And again, we'll taste the Cambria again, Jill, if you're happy to.
Yes, of course. So this Katie, Catherine's sister, is Julia, and the Pinot is named after her. So again, it's not just like two big vineyards. They're actually all these different blocks. And the Chardonnay is definitely bigger blocks because how it was planted back then. We do have vines planted in the 70s, Clone 4, Plumard, that make a large portion of this blend. But this one, we get a little bit more. I feel like we talk about clones a lot And I think it's because we aren't talking about our different vineyards. They're more our own little parcels. And whenever, I know everyone on is very educated, but I like to compare the clones with to apples. Like you have different types of apples bringing different flavors. And making this Julia's blend, again, in the vineyard, it's really important. Pinot especially is made in the vineyard. So the team, the vineyard team, just like the winemaking team, has been here a very long time. Pinot is getting multiple passes. I call it a diva grape. It needs its leafing, it needs its green drop, red drop. So everything that's happening as a vineyard is what is going to make the wine. So our job is to just really bring it in and not mess it up. And really bringing in things all separately. I'll do the same thing with the different picking. But what is great about these different clones, some clones ripen a little bit earlier. Our clone 2A on the east side of our vineyard will kind of be the start of harvest. And then our clone 23, which is our thicker skinned up on our hillside with like really well-drained soils, those will be the last to come in. So I'm kind of able to bring things in a very slow pace. And again, kind of do those, we have lots of different size tanks from 2-ton fermenters. Actually, my computer's on top of a 2-ton fermenter right now. And then 5-ton, 10-ton, and 20-ton. So those blocks kind of picking different days and different tank sizes. And we do inoculate with different yeast. So with that, it's similar to the barrels, trying to find there's lots of technology out there with yeast, and making sure to do those tanks with different yeast to bring a complexity to the blend. So even if we're sourcing from that single block, there's going to be different things from that one block, and bringing it all together. So my favorite part is sitting and after spring, we're always tasting the wines every day, but after the springtime, when things have gone through malolactic fermentation and really going through the wines and taking the time to kind of go through and score and what's going to make the best blend. And that's where I have a lot of fun. I always had a job where I stayed at a job for a long time. I didn't really run around and work a bunch of harvests. I did do one harvest in France, which was great. But I feel like working at a winery for the long time and seeing those wines through is really helpful. And that's where I kind of feel like, I mentioned it's all in the vineyard, but the blending time is really a time for me to put a stamp on the wine. But Julia's Vineyard, every year there's going to be vintage to vintage differences, but you can always get this Santa Maria spice. We have the red fruits, pomegranate, cranberry, but I always like to, I've been correcting myself and saying Santa Maria spice, but really it's a little bit of the Santa Maria funk. And again, I think we've been talking about, pairing food with wine, and having those savory notes and things other than fruit helps with the food pairings.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the spice is so great on this.
Yeah, I mean both of the Cambria wines have been like really expressive and open, which is, I think a wonderful thing to happen is if your bottle hits the table and as soon as it's open, it's showing, right away and showing all of its stuff. And this has that really pretty lifted red fruit quality, but there is that little bit of kind of dried floral mixed kind of spice quality in the background, which is really nice.
Yeah, absolutely.
And both these wines are 2018 vintage, and it was like across the board a beautiful vintage. Again, not worrying about, it was my second vintage here, so I felt like I kind of had things a little bit more under control. But it was a great year, weather-wise, perfect weather. So it's been fun that these wines are getting released and we're able to share them. And
Jill, I might have missed it. I don't think it was on the slide though. In terms of oak regiment, what do you typically do with Julia's Vineyard?
So the final blend is always around 20 to 25%. So nothing over that, but it could be a little bit under that, just how the year works out.
Great, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Shall we jump over to the Copain?
Yeah.
Sure. So in our glass, we have the 2017 Toussaint Somme. So this would new release for us. Our winemaking's pretty simple and straightforward. I think, we're a small, tiny winery. Most of our tanks are about 5 tons, 5 to 7 tons is our average tank size. We pick everything by hand, we destem everything. We do a little bit of whole cluster fermentation on a few things, but by and large, this blend ends up being mostly a destemmed fermentations. The way we work our tanks is we do pump overs instead of punch downs. The tanks we have little screens in the bottom, so we're able to do juice only pump overs. And so our goal is to not go for deep extraction, but just keep the fermentations kind of have a good general mix going for there, and just go for a lighter extraction. Our philosophy is picking a little bit early. We're going to stand by the fact that we believe we can make powerful layered wines by picking at, say, 22 bricks. And we don't try to, do super extraction. So, it's okay if our wine is translucent, see-through. That's kind of what we're going for. And with that, the way we handle our fermentations, we tend to have a lot of the berries stay whole throughout the fermentation process. So wines tend to have pretty wild aromatics, and I think we get sort of a carbonic effect because of the way our tanks are worked. If you're doing punch downs, you're kind of really doing kind of a deep mix to the tanks. But with our pump over style, it's just like moving juice from the bottom up over the top and just kind of keeping the ferment going, keeping it healthy. And then we drain off the free run and we go down to barrel, using about 5% new oak. And then everything else is, 1, 2, 3-year-old barrels. And then we just, like Jill said, I think my favorite part of the job and the most rewarding part is sitting down at that blending table in the springtime, deciding where everything's going to end up. And it's really fun when, we taste, like Jill said, all throughout the year, but like once you sit down in the spring, the wines are done fermenting, they're done going through mallow, they've kind of relaxed themselves a little bit. You can really see what they're all about. And that's the fun part, is seeing the diversity in all the different vineyards. So, our Sealift vineyard, great juiciness, great brightness, great energy. The Seascape, very rustic, very peaty, it can be, a little bit, savory. Carneros Hills West, that has its own flavor profiles there, maybe a little bit more sunshine, a little bit more deeper, darker extraction. Cloud Landing, a little bit more elegant style Pinot. So all those little pieces kind of go into this blend. So although we're trying to make a wine that is consistent and similarly styled every year, it's fun to kind of like tweak it in the way that you're feeling that year. So real straightforward.
And this is the 2017. Do you have any remarks on the vintage or?
2017 North Coast. We had insane fire that came through Santa Rosa. The Tubbs fire was probably one of the most devastating fires. The winery was shut down for a few days post-fire, but the good part in 2017 for Copan Wines was the fact that we were all harvested, everything was in barrel, so we were unaffected by that vintage. So the actual growing season, very even-keeled, just a nice, pleasant growing season. Not too hot, not too cold, a little bit of heat spike towards the end, but we start harvesting second, third week of August in general, so we're kind of over the hump before like the major heat spikes. So great growing season in my opinion.
Great.
Awesome. So
All right. Jill,
should we get to prize giveaway time, Mika? What do you think?
Yeah, I was hoping first, before we wrap up the tasting, maybe Jill, you can give us your favorite dish, and Ryan the same thing, and then we'll wrap this up.
Well, the roast chicken is a favorite with the Pinot, and Pinot is great because it's like the holiday wines or Thanksgiving wine, Christmas wine. It can kind of go with everything. But I always go for the roast chicken with the Pinot.
Perfect. And Ryan?
For me, I like braising dishes, especially in the winter. So as we get into the cool season, what I would go for is like braised short ribs with like a 5-spice kind of influence, maybe a little some of the Asian spice kind of mixed to that. So I like some braised short ribs over polenta, I think would be good. And then good brightness, acidity on the wine will kind of, you know, cleanse your palate, not overwhelm things. So that's what I'm thinking today. But you know,
Perfect.
Pinot is so versatile, as Jill mentioned. Like I'll put Pinot up against a steak. I'll go to a steakhouse and order Pinot. I'm not scared of that. I love Pinot with sushi. I love Pinot with takeout Chinese. Like Pinot with wood-fired pizzas. Like I think Pinot is the superior varietal because it's so versatile at the dinner table.
Yeah, absolutely. Great. Well, Sam, did you have some questions in mind already? Or you?
I mean, I jotted a couple of things down. I mean, I know it's a shame when you do these things because I have about a million other questions I'd love to ask you and Ryan, but we need to be sensitive of others' time. But yeah, during this, I jotted down a question. So first one to answer this in the chat will win the prize. And the question I had was, which winery did Ryan formerly work at, which later became acquired by Jackson Family Wines? And I believe Todd got there fastest. Is that correct?
It looks like
Who does spelling count?
I mean, they didn't capitalize. No. Cool. So I guess that's Todd. Did you have a question, Mika?
Sure. What was the surprising food pairing Jill suggested for the Chardonnay? And it looks like Hussein got it. Here, I should write this down. It was the steak. Great. Well, congrats. We will, I guess, reach out to the winners accordingly. Just write everyone's name down.
Great. Any last questions from the chat that we want to get to?
Sure. Do you want to just go right down the line here?
Sure. Yeah. Let's do Carolyn's question. Why not? Which was, what type of weather would have the most negative effect on your fruit? For example, too much heat or cold or fog.
Jill, what you go first.
We love bragging about our fog and our cool coastal, but it is very hard farming. So without great vineyard management, we could deal with if we have the fog, and then if we have like heat, and we can deal with rot and botrytis. So that's also something to be on the lookout. But Santa Maria Valley is also very hard for farming, but we have a great team, and every year we're very happy with our fruit.
Yeah, for me, you know, it's a late season heat spikes when the fruit's just almost ready but not quite there. Sometimes the heat spikes can really drive your sugars way up, but your flavors, your chemistry is not like ideally where you'd want it. So when you're kind of forced to pick because of threat of raisioning, that's my biggest fear. When you have like a perfectly good growing season and then you get walloped with you know, a major heat spike that goes on for many days, that can be devastating. And that's why we choose to farm out on the coast as much as possible, because it gives us the best defense against those major heat spikes.
With the vineyards that are located in, say, Petaluma or other wind gaps or areas where there's kind of access, be it a river valley for that kind of cool Pacific to come in, do either of you ever have to deal with issues around wind, say early on in the season with flowering?
Yeah, a little bit. So the past few years here, we've been all right, but you are correct that that could be scary at times too, like for the whole season.
Okay, cool. Awesome. Thank you. Paul wants to know, what's your biggest challenge about going from sustainable to organic? I assume that's for Ryan.
Convincing the finance department that it's the right decision. No. I think the biggest challenge is, you know, when you are farming in the fog, it's moist. You know, the clusters, the leaves, everything remains wet pretty far into the morning, and so you know you're not get that drying effect. So farming Grenache in a warm climate, you know, desert situation is easy to farm organic because there's a lot less threat. So farming near fog, near the coast, there's just a lot more. So you can't, you know, with organic sprays, you might have to go at shorter intervals of spraying, maybe every 7 days or 10 days, as opposed to every 14 days with maybe, you know, conventional sprays. So you just got to be more on your toes. You can't take your foot off the gas. So it's just a lot more intimacy. It requires everyone to be in the vineyard a lot more. So I don't find it much more challenging, other than it's just add more inputs financially and just time in the vineyard.
And we actually have a few blocks that are organically farmed but not certified, and it's our size, and like what Ryan's saying, it's just more needing to be done and getting across the whole vineyard in time. And that's why we just choose a few spots of the estate to go organic.
Cool. And Hussein asked a question about the Pinots and being destemmed, which I think was the case for both of them, although there might have been a little bit of stems included in the Copain. He wants to know if that's a choice based on stem ripeness challenges at harvest time, or are there other strong considerations for why you would do some whole cluster or just destem everything?
So for me, in Anderson Valley, it's almost like tried many times and failed. Like stem inclusion just doesn't seem to work well for me in Anderson Valley, because it's the fruit up there doesn't get a deep color, deep extraction. You add stems, it tends to pale the color. It kind of shifts the chemistry a little bit too much, where the wines look prematurely old. So it just doesn't seem to work. That being said, we always experiment with small batches off to the side, and just to see like, hey, maybe it'll work at some point. I tend to love it a lot more on the Sonoma Coast, where it can contribute tannin, a little more backbone, because the Pinots tend to be a little more polished on the coast. So I like to add stems because it can add more chalkiness and a little more crunchiness, I guess, to the palate. As far as stem ripeness goes, that will alter my percentage of stems using. So if they're really ripe stems, I'll do 50% in the tank or more. If they're, you know, kind of neon green and don't seem very ripe, I might back off on the percentage, but that's more just me being fearful than anything. I've had some older winemakers tell me never be scared of underripe stems. So I don't know.
It sounds scary. I'm kidding.
And I'm not sure how equipped you are to answer this. I'm not sure how well versed you are with what everyone else in the Jackson family, you know, circle is doing. But Kelsey was saying that they're excited to hear that Copan is in organic conversion stages. Is that in the works for more Jackson family properties?
I think there definitely is a push. I think newer generations coming into the industry, consumers are asking about it. It's definitely being considered up and down. And I'm not going to make any claims today, but there's definitely a lot of excitement for it. There's a lot of push for it, and I wouldn't be surprised if we don't look back in 5 years and say, "Hey, wow, look at what we're doing here." So I think what's really a cool thing about Jackson family and the creativity and the freedom we're given as winemakers and producers is we're always, under the gun to push the envelope. We're not just trying to make wines that get good scores or whatever. We're also trying to push the industry. We're trying to push things. So I wouldn't be surprised if you don't see a lot more over the next few years.
Seems like a question that we maybe should have just sent an email to Catherine about it, perhaps. Maybe she'd
Yeah.
she'd be able to track down the info for us. I think it's great, and I mean it's a valid question because I think we've seen, you know, what non-GMO and organic has done in the food culture over the last, you know, decade or 2 decades. So clearly it's on people's mind when it's coming down to wine as well. And yeah, it's obviously a hot topic.
Yeah. And it's, you know, we're still kind of like formulating what we want to be when we grow up as far as Copan goes. It's like, is it the certification organic that's important? Is it more healthy soils, regenerative farming? It's like we're kind of like figuring out exactly what that means, but it ultimately comes down to doing less bad things and doing more better things for the earth, for the vines, for the people. And so that's kind of where I'm at with that. Just, you know, I have young daughters and I want them to inherit this earth, not all messed up. So.
Yeah.
Well, guys, I think that sums up a fantastic hour together. I want to thank Jill. I want to thank Ryan, Sam, and Mika for doing a great job moderating this panel. A very successful launch of our series here in Canada. Some great discussion, great topics, and a very engaged audience. So thank you all so much for your questions and your pursuit of excellence and your commitment to California. So enjoy your afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much. And if there's any other questions, we'll follow up with Mika and Sam directly, and we can get you the answers then. Okay, so thank you very much, everyone, for a great afternoon. Thanks for joining us, and we will see you next time.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thanks for
everyone.
having me.
Bye.